Hello again, and welcome to Lesson 4 of Telium Summer School, The Future of Data and AI. I'm Marinda Hillier. Today, we're turning the spotlight on one of the most buzzworthy and fast-evolving technologies in marketing, generative AI. You'll hear from Dustin Horing and Sav Khetan, Telium's VP of Product Marketing, as they walk through 5 levels of Gen AI maturity from personal productivity to agentic intelligence. Whether you're embedding Gen AI in chatbots, personalizing content in real time, or using LLMs for inbound data classification, this session will help you separate hype from action. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to Telium's AI Masterclass. I'm Dustin Horning, and today I'm joined by Sav Khetan, who is our VP of Product Marketing here at Telium. Sav and I are actually both in the San Diego area, so when we're normally talking, it's over some delicious Indian food, but today we're remote and just sharing our screens. Welcome, Sav.
Thank you, Dustin. I'm excited to talk about Gen AI today. So for the listeners, I've been a customer of Telium, a partner. I started out as in the product team, and now I'm in product marketing. And we want to share with you just our experience and point of view on how the world is benefiting with Gen AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you're joining us now, you are in lesson 4. We've spent the last few weeks going over talking with Jeff about the state of the industry, the state of the marketplace overall in technology, and how that's driving all of this change. We talked with Rob about how data is your foundation, and being intentional with how and when you collect that data and activate that data is critical for anything you want to do with Gen AI or AI in general. Last week, we started talking about the applications of AI on a customer experience. We talked with Drew about how traditional ML plays a key role in developing scores and models that influence how and when we engage with our customer. And today, jumping into lesson 4, this is probably the most unquestionable topic that we had when we started thinking about this series, because it is really all about this Gen AI movement that is happening that makes everyone question, okay, how is this going to change the things I'm working on? How is this going to actually start rearing its head in impacting customer experiences, journeys, personalization, marketing, all of that? And so no one better to discuss that with here than Sav. So let's get into it.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. I have to admit that I was a skeptic when this first started. I myself was trying to not use Gen AI as much as I could, just because the output was not always amazing, and there was a lot of things about it that felt like it was not ready. But man, it's evolving so fast, and I feel so excited to share with our listeners just where we are now and where we can go next.
Yes, absolutely. It definitely had some stumbles out of the gate if you were trying to see production level value, and even, still it has its limitations, but it continues to evolve so fast. Every new model that comes out, every new capability is really solving for new problems, and it's only going to continue to evolve more from here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just again, as a quick refresher, we've generalized the different ways to apply AI to the customer experience into these 2 broad categories. Last week, we focused on enterprise ML, how to incorporate machine learning into decisioning and scoring and models. This week, we're going to be talking about generative AI. How do we take the ability to process natural language and generate creativity based on really tons of broad context clues in order to inform conversation or images or other aspects of creative content, and how that's going to connect with our customer experience and start to represent our brands and our marketing effort more and more. We talked about how that breaks down into different categories, the differences between these 2 approaches. When we're talking about use cases with enterprise ML, we're looking more at like scoring, fraud detection, data quality pieces. With generative AI, we're talking about conversational aspects of engagement with customers, chat, personalized content, your search, how it can influence the call centers and those sorts of things. The need for data is also different, although as Sav will talk about, they're definitely related. With enterprise ML, you're definitely talking about structured, labeled data that is consistent in the same format that generates the best models. With generative AI, part of that big change that we're seeing is that now it can interpret broad context, natural language, different sorts of inputs, and actually generate a consistent result. The role that Telium would play is that with the enterprise ML, we're talking about sourcing that data for the original training that's going to be happening and activating the model scores that are coming out. With generative AI, we're talking about providing that context, injecting ourselves into prompts to make sure that the AI is situationally aware and has the most relevant history as possible, and then providing that additional long-term context for where this visitor has come from. Some examples of that: predictive insights, predictive scores of who's going to churn or who's going to buy for enterprise ML. And for generative AI, we can talk about generating real consistent prompts into chatbots or other RAG models that need to know the most that they can about who they're interacting with in the moment there. Anything you'd add on to that, Sav?
No, I love what you said. It's pretty amazing what Gen AI can do right now, but it still needs guidance and guardrails.
Mm-hmm.
Our CEO, Jeff, loves to say that you're still the one that's flying the plane, and Gen AI might be really powerful like a jet engine now, but you still have to steer it. You still have to give it guidance. And we'll talk about that as we go. But the minute you put some guardrails and some rules, it can really be highly productive within that box. And that's what we want to help you unlock, right? And there's just so much you can do with it.
Exactly. So, putting it in the situation to be successful.
Yeah. And I wanted to start with just two of my favorite quotes about AI and primarily about Gen AI. These are two quotes that I hear most frequently from people I meet and people we talk to, customers. We were at the Databricks Summit last week and heard these over there as well. That we don't know if AI will take our jobs, but someone using AI might. This is a fact. I think just how much AI is affecting all the roles across the board. There's a lot of things you can do with AI to make your output better, faster, smarter. And I think if you start educating yourself, then you're getting ready for what's coming. And this is what we want to recommend is if you're not already trying it out, please start trying it out. That's going to help you a lot. And then the second quote, and Justin and I talked about this a lot, is don't think of Gen AI as just a tool. Think of it as a teammate and colleague. And what that means is, yes, it's a technology, but treat it a little bit more like you would treat a human being in terms of feedback, instruction, collaboration. And if you think of it that way, and if you treat it that way, the likelihood that you'll get more value and better value goes up significantly. And that has helped me a lot, specifically when I start doing a prompt instead of just telling it instruction, even saying things like, I'm going to ask you to do this thing. Now review the content I'm giving you and tell me what else you need, or tell me how you might go about doing this. Just changing the prompt just that much, and suddenly the quality of the output just dramatically increases. So
letting it coach you on how to use it, asking, what else do you need to know? Or what questions should I be asking? Or would you be asking so that I can give you more content here?
And that little pivot, right, it just immediately unlocks value. So today, when we were prepping for this, one of the things that, Dustin, you were talking about is just the correlation between this humanity and Gen AI, right?
So one of the ways one of the frameworks I apply is, when I think about a person and putting a person in a place to succeed, I want to think about, how do I know how that person's going to behave in an environment? And part of that is who they are, their genetic makeup, how tall they are, or things like that. A big part of that is their experience, the nurture side. What do they know? What have they been trained on? What have they done before? And then the third part is, what is the actual situation that they are in? And what is their awareness and their practice in that situation, right? So this can be applied to anything from, someone stepping up to bat a ball, or putting someone in a situation to give critical feedback to someone, right? There's different components that you inherit just because of who you are and your chemical makeup. There's different practices or training that you've done. And then there's the actual situational awareness itself. And so you would want a tall, strong person who's played a lot of baseball to step up and be able to see the ball really well in order to hit it. Or someone who's very emotionally intelligent and done a lot of hard conversations to be totally aware of the situation of where they're going to be giving critical feedback to someone to sit down and be able to coach in that situation. And AI is exactly the same. That here what we're doing is we're actually taking these models and these elements that have been trained on something. That's what they come from. That's their identity. Whether you're using Llama or OpenAI or any of these other models, they have this identity that they've inherited from what they've been trained on. Then there's all of these ways that you can provide them custom instructions and guardrails and other context for what they're going to be doing when you ask something of them. And then there's the actual prompt that you provide them of, okay, here's where I need you to go and give me this type of response back. Here are the things you need to know in this specific situation.
Yeah, what I love about this analogy is if you think of the DNA on the right, the who the model is, you have, unless you're running your own LLM, you have very little control on that part of the model. But the other two areas have immediate effect on your output, and that's where you have a lot of control, and that's where you can actually improve a lot of your output. And what we're finding is this middle one, this is the one that a lot of people are not yet getting good at. The prompt is, there's a lot of content and training on the prompt engineering part, of course, but this middle one is really what makes the tool or the model yours. And that's what sets it up to be your specific version of that assistant. So, as we talk, we're going to talk about this area a little bit as well. But I love this analogy. A lot of people are focusing on this part. You got to focus on the middle part as well.
Yep, absolutely.
So today, what we wanted to talk about was just what it looks like to level up with GenAI in your workplace, GenAI with interacting with your customer and then using it for yourself. There's just a lot of ways, all the hype of AI that we've been hearing since 22 or 23 really has been about ChatGPT and GenAI. That's what drove this entire hype cycle, because enterprise ML, as we call it, has been around for decades. But the real flip in the market and in the customer sentiment came when ChatGPT came out. And now the value of GenAI, the natural language processing element specifically, is what's driving so much interaction with AI. So we want to talk about how you could think about it. So we've organized it into these. Apologies for the broken animation, but we've organized it into these 5 levels. Okay, so level 0 is really productivity. This is probably what most people are already using. If you look at any of the GenAI research and reports that are out there, there's a huge amount of data that's saying 70 to 80% people are now getting benefit from GenAI in sales and marketing context. And that's really sits here. Using it to create briefs, using it to create content, using it to create variations of content, summarizing, researching, analysis. You can put big Excel sheets and get outputs from it. This part is really where everybody is spending time and energy right now. And honestly, if you're not already doing something here, then it's worth trying and worth getting started, of course, with approval from your legal teams. But these tools, so many of them have a free version. The free versions are very, very complete, and they give you a lot of output that you can try. All the big content tools, Figma and Canva and Adobe, and everybody have a GenAI element to them now, and the output is getting dramatically better. And we know in the beginning of the masterclass, when we talked about the jump in quality, this is what I was talking about. I tried ChatGPT in Jan, and I felt the output was average. And today, that same output, but with the small pivots to the prompt has just jumped dramatically. So we won't spend too much time on this. We're going to talk about the next 4 levels, really, which is customer facing. But we just wanted to highlight that this is, of course, the thing that everybody talks about, and all the research is highlighting, especially in coding and things like that, how big an impact Gen AI is having right now.
Yeah, I like this being foundational, not just because it's ubiquitous, like you described, but one, this can actually help you with the other 4 levels. Whatever you're trying to do in the next level, you can use this foundational level to inform that. And 2, it gives you a familiarity with how the process works. What are good prompts? What are bad prompts? And that, again, will inform what you design as you move up the levels.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's talk about the others, right? And so level 1, we'll go in deeper into each of these levels, but level 1 is really using Gen AI for inbound analysis for customer data, example, sentiment. But the idea being, when a customer gives you a big piece of feedback, like a review or input, or just a phone call transcript, analyzing that takes time. And typically that used to be unstructured data that sat in a data warehouse or a lakehouse, and it was hard to use that on an ongoing basis. And Gen AI is completely flipping that on its head. Now, if you send that 400-word customer review through a Gen AI, you can immediately get some information about it and then act on it right then and there if you want. So this is something that we find a lot of our customers are doing right now, and it's getting them immediately actionable information from what would typically be long-form customer input that would just sit in some tool. Then, the other level 2, sorry, Dustin, were you going to say something about that?
No, just, it's exactly like you said, because it's able to understand a small bite-sized portion. You used to have to wait until you collected a lot of this to run any sort of modeling on it to get an understanding of a collective sentiment. But now you can say, for this one interaction, how is this person feeling right now with a certain degree of certainty?
Exactly. Okay, so the next level, the productivity, this is probably what you're seeing a lot from all the different brands out there, whether it's a shopping assistant, whether it's an assistant inside a software tool. This is customers getting help from an AI assistant in that environment from that brand. And this is really taken off. If we remember early days when some automotive dealers were trying this out, people were able to get the assistant to say anything they wanted and make them promises. Now there's a lot of guardrails being put out there by all the tools, by the Googles and OpenAI and Microsoft. So there's a lot of stuff happening here, Copilot being such a big conversation. But the reality is, there's a very basic level of this that you can do without a lot of work from your side that helps you get going. And it's important because you can learn how this works. You can learn how it works for your customers, and then you can use that to graduate to the next level. But these level 1 and 2 is where the majority of the customers are operating right now. And we'll talk about why that is, but it's also a great place to get started. Either one of those places is a great place to get started. And then level 3 is where it really sort of, the rubber meets the road, if you will, where you can start injecting visitor-specific, context-specific data into the response from the Gen AI assistant or the chat application, so that you can give them a personalized offer. You can give them a personalized product recommendation based on what you know about the user. This is probably the level where the more mature customers have reached right now, and we'll talk about why. This is exactly where some of our leading edge customers on Gen AI are here. That is definitely the minority. The majority are in levels 1 and 2, and level 3 is aspirational for a lot of people. It's coming, but it's evolving fast, right? With the evolution of protocols like MCP, the Model Context Protocol, and A2A, and all these different technologies that are coming out from all these technology providers, level 3 is what's getting unlocked right now. And it's all in service of the dream, which is level 4, which is agentic, right? I mean, you probably heard that word if you're in this, if you're doing any research on AI right now. Everybody from Google to Salesforce to Databricks is talking about agentic AI, and that's where we're headed. And honestly, the work that you do for level 3 really sets you up for level 4, because the big jump between level 3 and 4 is on the AI side, but the jump between level 2 and 3 is on your technology side. So that's kind of how we want to help you graduate. If you're trying to decide how to move up from where you are, or if you're trying to decide how to get started, this is our goal, right? To give you some context on what these things are and what it takes to get started.
Yeah, we talked in level 1 or in session 1 about how this is part of it, the evolution is the technology itself, and then part of the evolution is the actual infrastructure and the broad adoption of that associated with that technology that really unlocks it, right? If you think about a car, if you just had even the nicest car in 1900, you wouldn't get much value out of that car because all of the roads would be dirt, there'd be no gas stations, right? You need the infrastructure around it. And the difference between level 4 and level 3 is that infrastructure of now you have such a broad adoption of these different applications of personalized AI, and they can all interact with each other, that you can create a hyper-personalized environment.
I love it. What a great analogy. Okay, so we'll get started with level 1. Now, yes, these slides have a little more copy on them than we would like, but it's intentional so that you have it for reference and you can come back to it. But just setting up level 1 one more time, think of it as this way, right? Using GenAI to understand qualitative customer input and long-form customer data. That's the simplest way to think about it. Of course, you can do it for a lot more things, and I'll give you some examples. But honestly, when a customer gives you a review, customer gives you input or feedback, on Amazon now, you might have noticed that if you, instead of reading the 1,000 reviews, there's a little AI summary sitting on top that's giving you very nice summary of all the different reviews that are down there. It'll tell you both the positives and negatives, and it'll quickly highlight the things. And it's so helpful, right? You still go and read the reviews yourself if you want, but it gives you an immediately actionable summary of a lot of content that's sitting below it. And that's kind of how you can think about it. Normally, if you're in retail, e-commerce, finance, actually any of the direct customer industries, you're probably getting a lot of customer input, whether it's through email, whether it's through your website or your phone calls. That long form input usually just does not get processed for a while because it's expensive, and it's been expensive and it's been a lift. But now with the natural language processing capabilities of GenAI, if you can figure out how to get it through GenAI on its way in, it becomes immediately actionable because you can add a label to it. You can add a quick 1 or 2 word summary, whether it's positive, negative, whether it's about a product or service, or whether it's a feedback, or whether it's a complaint. You can get all those labels attached to it. You can get sentiment. Is it positive, negative, neutral, very positive, very upset, very angry? And then you can take action on them. And you can even validate them. When somebody's giving you an input like an address or zip code or product name, very often people write the wrong product code in their feedback, and then it doesn't get processed. But now people are using LLMs to clean that up on the way in. You can use it to detect PII. So just if you start thinking about when data is coming into you from the customer, you need a lot of signals about that data so you can take action on it. And LLMs have made that process very, very simple. So what you have to do really to get going on this, if you're not already here, is spend some time tuning your GenAI tool with the context for your company, for your products and your business needs. Give it access to PDFs, website, docs, training materials, videos that you have to train your employees. Those are all great input elements to get your GenAI environment set up for you. And then figure out what your prompt engineering process or approach would look like. A lot of companies are using tools like Dataiku, for example, to do prompt engineering. But prompt engineering and the context training, those two, like we showed you earlier, those are the 2 elements that really make the GenAI environment yours. And that's where you get the best output. And once you have that, you got to think about how will you send the customer data to that application, whether it'll go through your CDP or whether it'll go directly. If you send it through the CDP, then you can actually enrich the profile with those labels. And now it becomes immediately tied to that visitor. And then you can take action on it whenever you want. And then finally, figuring out what is the rules, whether you're taking action, whether it's just for improving your data quality, whether it's just inbound, all these kind of discussions you can have with your team. But just this is the least risky use of LLMs that we are seeing from our customers right now, and very high value to risk ratio, actually much higher value in terms of what it does for you, and very low risk because it's not customer facing.
Yeah, I love the unlocks that come because it's so much more accurate. it's so much faster. It's so much individualized. But I think a mistake you could make is is to just still apply this as a retroactive look back of, okay, how did this interaction go? To your point about activation, is now this can be a proactive look ahead of what should we do right now, because we now know this new information in a structured format that they gave us an unstructured way to say they are happy, they are unhappy, they are likely to buy, they are unlikely to buy. Let's go take an action.
That's a great point, right? It makes you proactive from reactive. So really quick, just I won't spend too long here, but imagine that you're getting input from your website or your app or even in the store. Now, if it's a 1 to 5 rating or an NPS score, that's fine. That's already quantitative. But if it's a text box that they filled out, imagine sending that signal directly to your prompt tool. This could be a collection of tools that you're using, and then your GenAI analyzer, does the kinds of analysis that we were talking about, whether it's sentiment or categorization, validation, and then you get back the response as structured data that you can immediately add to your real-time profile. And if, like Dustin was saying, if you've now got the proactive response in your strategy, then you can take action immediately across any of the channels. If they were really upset, you can give them an offer, you can reach out to them, you can tag them in a certain way to put them in a certain category, you can set them up for follow-up, whatever you want to do. There's a lot of options here to really take it to the next level. So we are finding majority of our customers who are using GenAI, they're at least doing this already. So this is something that you can start with, and it really has very high value to risk, because you're not putting this in front of the customer. So even if the GenAI makes a mistake, it's still inbound, and you can take care of that mistake without having any immediate impact. Okay, if I go to level 2, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because this is probably the most common use you're saying. Now, I put this as level 2 and not level 1 because this is customer facing. And I wanted to make sure that inbound or productivity AI, Gen AI, which is for yourself, is separated from customer facing AI, where the risk goes up, right? When the response from the Gen AI application is directly going to the customer, now you have a lot more risk, because the Gen AI tools, they still hallucinate. They're much, much, much better than they used to be, but they can still say things that are not brand appropriate. They could still give wrong information, and they could give a really bad experience to your customer. And there's, of course, all the different technology companies are working hard to make that much more manageable and make it much safer for you to use, but it's still a risk. So that's why this is level 2, because banks and healthcare companies and all the regulated industries are definitely taking their time to do this, whereas retail is, travel, hospitality, they've all jumped on it because they have a lot of customer support needs. But wherever you sit, there's a lot of things to consider, and it's very easy to get started with this. There's a lot of tools out there now that will index your website and docs and all the materials and immediately get up to speed. And then if nothing else, they can be a support bot, or they can be a Q&A bot, FAQ bot. They can help customers find quick answers to different problems. They can help them solve, small, very common issues. A lot of those things are very beneficial, but you just got to spend some time to help the bot get trained and put the right guardrails. So this is a great way to help your customers do more with your brand. The main energy here you got to spend is to train your assistant and put the guardrails and make sure you have a process in place to check the responses on a regular basis, so that if it's making mistakes, that you can fix them. You've got to set up some APIs and access for the bot, or I'm calling it a bot, but the application, to help it leverage all the right information. For example, at Telium, we have all our docs, all our knowledge base, all our history of support tickets, all our customer feedback that we've gotten over time, all the issues. We've used our assistant to train on all those things. So now it understands when you ask it how to configure a tag versus how to configure a connector. It knows the difference, and it knows where to go get that information, and it's understood those things. So you got to help the assistant that you're using get there. And then the most important thing here is you got to figure out how you are using the feedback to fine tune the assistant. When you launch it, it will never be great. It will always be, just acceptable. And then the more time you invest fine tuning it, the better and better it gets. And the results are quite dramatic, actually. So I know, Dustin, since you used to manage support and implementation, you've probably seen a big jump with this.
Yeah, absolutely. We always say the only thing worse than no answer is a wrong answer, and that was always my hesitance with things like that. But exactly those guardrails, teaching especially around how to determine if something's off limits or if they're not confident in an answer, to defer. Like let me bring in a human. Let's set up a time with an agent. Right, is a great way to make sure that there's they're answering what they're confident in, but and they're helpful in the ways that they've been really trained, but they don't overstep.
And you'll find this is probably, I couldn't even list all the different tools that you can use for this now. I think in Scott Brinker's latest Martech report, there's over 100 of these vendors already out there, and they have so many different ways to onboard your content and your training, from customer information to support to all your internal employee training materials. All those things can be used to get this assistant ready to go. But it's something that, depending on your industry, a lot of people are already heavily leaning forward into this. But the next level is where now the personalization kicks in. So we'll talk about that. Oh, sorry, I'm going upwards. Okay. So I wanted to call this out, right? Like I said before, level 2 was level 2 and not level 1 because it has customer facing. And there's still major risks when you think of customer facing AI, and you cannot take it lightly. And it's very important, if you're starting to put direct output from GenAI in front of your customer, for you to take these things a little bit more formally in your organization. And the main thing is, it still gives wrong answers. It doesn't matter how good the output is. If you score it over 100 outputs, you'll find that there's a percentage of answers that are wrong. And when it comes to customer-facing responses, like Dustin said, worse than no answer is a wrong answer. This matters when somebody's asking you how to set up a configuration or an API or an integration. This becomes very important. So you got to figure out how you're going to manage this. And then this is really the reason why people have been so hesitant on GenAI, is it constantly starts saying things that are questionable. And depending on your brand and depending on your legal position, this could be a big issue. So that's why GenAI still needs oversight and supervision. GenAI has still not reached the point that you can just turn it on and forget about it. In the propensity model or in a recommendation model, that you don't have that issue. The model does exactly what it's supposed to do every single time. But in a GenAI situation, because it's generative and because it's creating this content, it can easily make a mistake, and it's making mistakes still. So you got to figure out your process for oversight and supervision before you go on. So as we wanted to call this out before we keep leveling up, because the minute you start putting GenAI in front of the customer, you got to have a formal process in your organization for oversight and supervision to make sure that you're not adding to the risk.
Yeah, I had a friend who was I know we all have these AI hallucination stories now, but this one particularly pertinent. He was using one of these paid for high level models within his company, and it made a mistake, and he called it out. He's like, "Hey, I think you got this wrong." And they're like, "Yeah, I got it wrong." Like, I would expect you to get this right. You're right. I should have gotten this right. So should I ask for a refund? Like, yes, you should ask for a refund. It's just talking you into, you can still set it up to say the wrong thing.
For sure. And even just last week, there was a news about a lawyer who got in trouble because of all the citations coming out of these models still being made up, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. You can ask it to not do it, and it will still do it because it's a generative model. It's in its name, right? It generates. So if we think to the next level, though, it doesn't mean that there's no reason to that you should not be using it, and it doesn't mean that the risks outweigh the benefits. In fact, it's quite the other way around. The benefits have definitely started to outweigh the risks, which is why you're seeing it more and more. And if you do the work, there is a lot of value you can unlock in this for yourself and for your customer. So that's kind of what we wanted to use. We don't want it to feel like it's doom and gloom. There's a reason why the hype is so crazy about it, because what it can unlock for you is real. And I've been in personalization for almost 2 decades now. And I can tell you the biggest hassle in personalization has always been creating something unique for each different audience.
Creative.
And
Yeah.
you're right. I want to create a different asset for someone in Seattle versus someone in LA versus someone in New York. Just that simple thing was so expensive back then. And now it's becoming so much easier. And honestly, thinking about personalization and Gen AI, they feel like it's a match made in heaven. And there's a lot of benefit here. So that's kind of what we want to talk about. This is probably the most complex use case we'll talk about today. And however, this is where everybody's going. And most of our mature customers, this is where they've reached. And I'll walk through the details, and we'll go through the data flow. But just to think about, if you want to set a target, if you're not here, there's a lot of opportunity for you to start trying these things out. So what this level is really thinking about personalized engagement using Gen AI, figuring out how you can use your Gen AI assistant to give very personalized responses back to your customers, not just based on the question they asked or the prompt they gave, but based on everything you know about that customer and based on all the history you have about them, whether they are high value, what is their favorite color, what is the product they typically like to buy, where they're based. You can use all that information to come back and give them a very personalized response. And it completely changes the experience, both for you and for them, right? So that's why this promise is so heavy. It helps you offer very relevant information back. So again, I'm not going to talk one more time about the training, but Gen AI always begins with training, guardrails, and context, right? Making the assistant yours and making sure that the responses coming from the assistant reflect your brand voice, your tone, your rules, all the things that you say and don't say. You got to set that assistant up to do that first. And that comes in the instructions that you give it. Once you, and the training that you can give it with reference data and reference information. Once you've done that, you got to start now thinking about what APIs you need to make available to that assistant so that it can actually get the right consented data when the person is interacting with it. So let's say I go and ask the chat application for a recommendation for the right product, and then Dustin goes and asks it. We should get 2 different responses based on what you, the brand, know about us. And to do that, you need to have the right API available so that the assistant can go figure out what you know about us. And the reason that's becoming easier now is the industry is investing heavily in this area. So it had this protocol called RAG, which was retrieval augmented generation. And then now it just recently launched Model Context Protocol, or MCP, and they're starting to launch more like A2A. But expect that these protocols are similar to USB. They're designed for these technologies to connect with each other easily. And as more and more of these protocols come out, it's going to become that much easier for these assistants to interact with your technology stack. And that's really where you got to spend time now, is which protocols and which connection points you need based on your desired outcome and your chat application. Once you have those 2 figured out, then you can really unlock the right information. And then, third will never ever be the least, which is you got to figure out how to validate and fine tune and keep an eye on the assistant so that you can make sure that it's giving great experiences, not subpar experiences. So let me
totally agree. One piece I would add, just with the different technologies that are coming out, and all of their abbreviations, RAG and MCP and A2A, oftentimes they're not replacements for each other, right? You're not choosing between RAG or MCP. They're describing different aspects of the process, whether that's a description of the architectural flow of how the data goes, or a protocol for the different syntax that's expected in a call and response, or things like that. So they can be used together. It can be a somewhat daunting and confusing piece, but the ultimate goal is that you want to understand what's your end goal, what are you trying to do, and then work backwards from there for how that's going to work together. And the specific technology pieces will fit together to answer that once you have a clear understanding of what you want to do.
That was awesome. Now you guys know why Dustin is the moderator. Exactly. I think exactly, right? There is no limit to the technology deep dives you can do. Start with your end goal in mind and then work back from there. And honestly, for any of the listeners, if you guys want us to share more about these protocols, please let us know, and we'll be happy to do a session on those. So let me just set up what this data flow might look like. Now, remember what I said, this is definitely the more mature end of our Gen AI customers. And I'm going to show you a very involved use case, but I'm going to also talk about the different ways you can think of this use case. So imagine that your customer has a prompt to your chat application. You have a customer facing chat application. The user comes in and says, help me buy a purse, right? My sister just bought a nice purse recently. So imagine that you go to the chat application. Now, this application needs to first understand who's asking and who they are. What do we know about them? Are they a loyal customer? What did they buy in the past? Do we know anything about their preferences and where they are based? Do we know anything about if they've done any returns or if they've had any issues? What do we know? So this is where the chat application will send a request to, let's say, your CDP in this case. In this case, we're just showing Telium, but it would be your CDP. And you would need a very quick, very immediate response, usually a real-time response, so that they can get back the enriched visitor data for this request specifically. And this would have to be consented. So you have to make sure that whichever data you're using for the response here, you have consent from the visitor for this, right? Now, in a lot of cases, this might be enough, and then you give the response back to the user. But what most people are doing is now they're doing this other query. So if you're trying to make a recommendation for a product, maybe you're looking at the product database, maybe you're looking at inventory, maybe you're looking at availability and shipping times. That all information tends to live somewhere else. So now you can figure out how to go get that information. So now this chat application has visitor-specific information, then they have product-specific information, maybe even company information. It could be whether if you're recommending a jacket or something like that. And then for the very mature customer, they're going to their next best action tool and even getting the offer information. So now the chat application is not necessarily deciding what offer it should give. It's asking the AI application based on all this information, hey, what offer should I show this user? And then you send back the LLM response, and it's very personalized and it's very, very relevant to that interaction. So I'll pause here for 1 second so you can digest. But this is 3 different calls that this application made using 3 different APIs, and each one got a different piece of information, and that allowed this chat application to give such a highly personalized response. And honestly, that's what it takes, right? If you use any one of these pieces of information, you're still doing a better job than the LLM would do on its own. But the more you combine, the better and more targeted the response gets. And this is the most mature version of this use case. A lot of people are just doing this vector database to make sure they get product information. A lot of people are doing only the CDP, and a lot of people are doing just this next best action. Any of those is still a great step, but now you can see what you can work towards, right? If you can get all these going, then that means you have all this data available, you have all these APIs available, and that this chat application is now giving your customers very, very targeted, appropriate responses. In travel and hospitality, this is where they are reaching. They're trying to get there because very competitive space, as you can imagine. But this is the vision of where people want to go with Gen AI in general.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. And this, combined with what we'll talk about at least high level for the next level, gets into some of the difference between like automation and agentic, right? And I think where this is still sitting, as you're describing it here, is this level of complex automation with an LLM component of it. Not quite agentic, because we're still following specific triggers for when we go and get which piece of information to then allow an LLM to respond. Versus something agentic would have all of these tools and resources and an awareness of what it has access to, and would decide when and if to call different components and when and if to provide different responses to a customer, rather than just automating those processes. For me, this reminds me of, I'm a big fan of the American football, and in the NFL, the quarterbacks will have a little earpiece that the coaches can talk into. You don't want your quarterback to come to the first snap and have your coach tell you, okay, here's all the situations you might come up against. Here's how I want you to respond in each one. What you want is the coach to be able to say, okay, this is the situation you're in right now. This is the play I want you to run right now. And then the next play, you get new instructions based on how the situation has changed. And so this is that engagement here where your chat application is your quarterback, and you're feeding it the different information pieces that it needs just for that next prompt.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And the difference I would say between this and agentic, at least the way I understand it, is in this case, this chat application will always follow these 6 steps in this order, right? That's the rules that we have given this chat application. We have told it that use data from here for this purpose, use data from, and it'll only do this. And it doesn't have its own intelligence to go decide based on the prompt to do something else. And in an agentic world, we'll give it access to all these tools, and then we won't give it a rule set. We'll just tell it what outcome we want, and it'll figure out on its own when it should go to which tool, and it'll give the right answer. And that, that's, of course, we're not there yet. We're getting there, but we have reached here. Well, if you give it very specific guardrails and you tell it when to do each of these integration points, then it can actually do this. And a lot of the tools, our customers who are doing this in, near real time, 2 to 3 second response time total to figure all this out and to come back with a response that's acceptable. And that really is where we are today with this technology. And it's very reliable and it's consistent if you put in the work in tuning and maintaining it. And it can give your customers a very, very appropriate response that they can do something with. So just going back to our broken animation slide here for a second. So we talked about productivity really quick. This is, hopefully you guys are already doing this at work and you're seeing how much it's improving. This is what we see most of our customers doing, levels 1 and 2. This one not yet customer facing, and this customer facing. This is where we see a lot of our mature customers are starting to play. It's still not as much as it sounds in the industry. It's still slow. And a lot of that has to do with just the complexity and the risk both. And then the next is the agentic AI, which Dustin was talking about. So today in our session, we're not going to go into agentic AI. That's our masterclass 4 that's coming up with Zach Wente, and I'm very excited for that one too. Actually, I would love to learn from him as well on agentic. He's on our team and he's bringing a lot of agentic workflows to our marketing team as well. But just where LLMs have reached, the reliability and the performance of these LLMs, and now vendors like Amazon and Databricks and Google and everybody are giving you a lot of foundation to do your own agents. And then the idea is you give the agent the end goal, and then the agent figures out all the different integrations it's supposed to use and what data it's supposed to bring in and how it puts it together to give the customer the right output. And that's really the holy grail, right? We've been talking about this hyper-personalization for so long, but it feels like now we have the right set of tools that can actually figure out who the customer is, can figure out their needs and their desires in that moment based on the prompt, and then give them the exact output, whether it's content, whether it's an offer, whether it's a video, whatever it is, to respond to their requirement in that moment. And that'll be very exciting where we can go with this, but definitely not there yet. That being said, it's the worst it's ever going to be today, right? It's only going to get better from this point. So
so excited for the future there.
Oh man.
I think we had a couple other talking points we wanted to summarize with this. I think maybe we'll have to save those for another time or a follow-up conversation. At this point, we're coming up on time here for this conversation, Sav. So any closing thoughts in the last minute here?
So my closing thoughts in the last minute, then I'll just stop on this slide, are that one, Gen AI is here to stay. There is no way that our future is not combined with Gen AI in all our lives, no matter what our role is. And honestly, it's a great piece of technology. And if understood and used well, it can be a massive unlock and a level up for pretty much anything you're trying to do on the marketing and customer engagement side of things. When it comes to software, it's already proven just how much of a difference it has made. And now the next domain that it's conquering is definitely marketing and customer engagement. So yeah, if that's what you're trying to unlock, you've got to give Gen AI a try.
Well said. And thank you all for joining us today and for spending your time with us. Looking forward to wrapping up this series with our last session, session 5 with Zach. So look out for that coming up. And thank you again to Sav for walking us through all this.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you all.
Thanks for watching Lesson 4. As you've seen, Gen AI isn't just transforming creativity, it's rewriting how brands engage in real time. In our final session of the advanced track, we'll look ahead to what's next. Agentic intelligence. These autonomous AI systems are reshaping how businesses operate. Don't miss the conclusion to our summer series.